Yeah, I didn't think so.
I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Can we have a roll call, please, Karen?
Corby Chappelle,
Here.
Sally Cohen. Here. Jose Oliveros,
Here.
Evan Source,
Here.
Jordan Carpenter,
Here.
Becky J. Here. And Alex Roskovitz is excused.
All right, everybody have a chance to review the minutes of the April 1st, 2024 meeting? Any corrections to be made? I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I move we approve the minutes.
I second that. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Minutes are approved. All right, moving right along. Move down to visitor and public comments. You folks are all part of the presentation. Do you wish to speak, Mr.? Then we'll move down to staff reports, but we'll have staff reports in a minute. Any unfinished business? I think we have it, so we'll move along to new business. I now open the public hearing on SUB-2024-01 at 7:06 p.m. My name is Corby Chappelle. I am the chairperson for this hearing. The hearing will be conducted in accordance with the Independence Developmental Code and State Law ORS 197.763. Specifically, the staff will first present the staff report and recommendation. The applicant will then have an opportunity to present the proposal and address any issues raised by the staff report or recommendation. For public testimony, I will first ask to hear from people who would like to speak in favor of the proposal. I will then ask to hear from people who have neutral comments or questions about the proposal, either for or against. Finally, those in opposition to the proposal will have an opportunity to present testimony. City staff may then present additional material and recommendations based on the public testimony. The applicant will be given the opportunity to have the last word. After each presentation, I will ask for questions from the commission. If you intend to present oral testimony, please fill out a request to speak from a form located at the back of the room and give that to city staff. We are recording this hearing, so please also clearly state your name and address when you're called to speak. This will help in preparing accurate written minutes of the hearing and also assist with mailing copies of the decision to all interested parties. If you have written testimony or other evidence to submit, please give that to staff so it can be entered into the record. Given the number of people present, we ask that each speaker limit themselves to no more than 5 minutes. Please remember that all presentations will be timed. You will be informed when your allotted time has expired. All speakers exceeding the time limit will be asked by the chair to immediately conclude his or her remarks. If you do not finish your presentation, be sure to provide a copy of your statement to staff. In order to minimize repetitive testimony, organizations are encouraged to have only one person speak for the group, with other members of the organization standing to show their support. Each person may testify only once unless called back to the podium at the request of a commission member to respond to a question. Thank you for your cooperation. The commission is required to disclose any conflicts of interest and ex parte contacts that we have with the proposal or applicant. That is, whether we have any financial or other personal interest in the proposal and whether we have spoken with anybody about the proposal outside of this hearing. Also, commissioners may only participate if they can do so without undue bias, either for or against the application. Do the commissioners wish to make disclosures?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I just want to disclose for the record, I do have a relationship with the Executive Director of Habitat. I do not have a financial relationship or financial interest in this proposal and believe I can still participate without any bias. But I did want to put that.
Correct, thank you. Are there any challenges from the audience as to conflicts of interest, ex parte contacts, or bias related to any member of the commission? State law requires me to tell you a number of things at the beginning of the hearing. First, the applicable substantive criteria that apply to this application are contained in the written staff report and will be identified and discussed in the oral staff report. Second, your testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards those criteria or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or development code that you believe to apply to this application, ORS 197.763-5B. Third, failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker or other people an opportunity to respond may preclude an appeal of a decision on this application based on that issue, ORS 197.763-5C. Finally, to the applicant, failure to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the city to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court, ORS 197.7963-B. We will now hear the staff report.
Perfect, thank you, Chair. My name is Fred, I'm here to present this staff report for you folks. This application looks very familiar because you've seen it twice. You saw it originally in 2000, and then you did see, at that point, there was 4 lots in the subdivision. You did see then an amendment to the original subdivision approval to come in and ask for an additional lot. So you've had 2 public hearings about it. The reason that it's before you again is because the approval expired, and Habitat for Humanity now owns the property, or now controls the property, and they're looking forward to getting that approval back going so they can complete the project. The project hasn't changed at all. You'll see that there still is 5 lots with the access way through the site, like we originally discussed and approved as part of the proposal. You'll also note that there's the same private road, 20 feet wide, through the site. The applicant does have the intent of, in the future, coming in and asking to put a lot line between each of the duplex lots as part of it's called the Middle Housing Land Division process that's established in state law. That will be in the future though. At this point, it's the same exact proposal that you folks have seen. As such, the conditions that originally were applied to it are largely the same. They've been slightly tweaked a little bit, just to either for clarity or where things had been sort of changed over time. Those conditions no longer apply. You'll remember the first time it came through, the road was on the south side of the road, and we conditioned it to put the road on the north side of the road to better align with Riverwood Court that's on the east side of the road, east side of 7th Street. That condition went away because the proposed private street is now on the north side of the lot. Also, some of the things related to the access way, that condition's no longer there because they're proposing an access way through the site now. Access way is a unique feature of this property. If you're familiar, and I should have probably pulled up a map, there's a long section of 7th Street between, let's say, Maple, where Becky and Evan live off of, and G Street, where there is no access west. So it's essentially a large super block, and so this proposal would allow pedestrian access to connect west over to Inspiration Garden and help break up that super block. And it's a very nice feature of this development. The criteria that apply to it are subchapter 10, subchapter 11, subchapter 17, that allow uses in residential zones, the density requirements in subchapter 18, the residential design standards in subchapter 19, the criteria for the zone in 21, and then the subdivision standards in subchapter 90. I won't go through each of those in full. I will note that no traffic impact analysis was deemed necessary for this proposal. The original submittal showed that it would generate, I can't remember, something like nine trips total during peak hours. based on that and based on the fact that we had another traffic analysis prepared for a development nearby that folded this development into their analysis, we didn't feel like revisiting an analysis was necessary. We recommend approval of this with, I want to say it's 16 conditions. I think all of them are fairly straightforward. I will also note that there are, in attachment D, there are comments and conditions from our city engineer, Matt Hendrick, of things that he'll be looking for in the civil review of the plans. Those are sort of folded into the decision based on some condition, but let's say it's condition 7. Yeah, condition 7. So I think that's basically all of it from our perspective. The project is the same, it was previously approved, and based on that, we would recommend approval again of this development. Are there any questions that you folks have of me? Yeah.
Okay, I remember the last time that we had this proposal came forward, they were questioning whether or not the garage needs to be offset, and you've given us the same footprint again. So are you setting back your garage from your front door like the city standard asks?
So that's a great question, Becky. This garage will need to be set back 4 feet from the front facade of the building, as we discussed. I mean, you did see that as part of a third consideration. The consideration that we discussed at that point was a code interpretation about garage setbacks, essentially. So you have seen this proposal essentially 3 times, but the third time it was for a code interpretation about where the garage needs to be in relation to the front facade of the building.
And I just didn't see that in here. I did see that you had noted,
Right.
you noted that they had to replace the telephone pole and put it underground, which was another question. But because I don't see it on this plan, I just want to make sure that everybody knows that the garage needs to be set back from the front of the house.
That's right.
I had another question about how wide are these driveways? Can 2 cars park side by side on them?
It looks to me, I'm looking at the plan here, it looks to me that the double car driveway, they're showing it 21 feet essentially from side to side. Our garage standard is not that 2 cars can park side by side in front of each unit. It's that you could park a car in front of the garage that you could also park in. So they could park in the garage and they could also park one in the driveway.
I just, since it's a narrow, private road, you don't have as much parking because you can't park on one side of it. So I'm just trying to make sure there's enough parking, as you all know, that's my thing.
That's right. One condition that you will know, just sort of anticipating future development in the area, we do anticipate that at some point the lot to the north will develop. And so this easement, essentially, there's a condition in here that the easement would allow access to the property to the north. And the idea is that when that property to the north develops, they could do essentially the same thing, combine the streets, then you could have parking on the sides of the streets. If that makes sense.
I understood that, but they have built a new shop behind their house, so I don't think they're looking at selling anytime soon.
Gotcha.
So, channeling Becky, I have a question. You indicate that the number of spaces is as required by chapter 73, subchapter 73, so how many spaces are required?
1 space is required per unit, and you'll remember that essentially how that works is we require 1 space. We used to require 1 space in a garage. When we changed that standard, we said you could have 1 space in a garage and essentially a 20-foot driveway. so you could park the car in front of the garage. So essentially, you're gonna get 2 on every lot, assuming that you don't fill your garage with stuff. Or the standard was that you would provide a carport in the same 20 feet, or you would have 2 paved spots in front of, or at some point on your property, some location on your property, if that makes sense.
Becky?
I had a question about the access to Inspiration Garden, because where this sidewalk would put people is at the area that hasn't been developed at all, and there's no pathway through there. It's just woods full of poison oak right now. There are a couple of deer paths in there, but we really haven't concentrated on that. It's kind of been left to itself. Is the city gonna put that path through, up to the park, into the park?
I don't know if we have a good answer to that right now. I think that this access way at least gives us the opportunity to do that in the future.
And would that access way be available for other people in the neighborhood who want to not have to go up to Jeet or down around to Maple?
Yes, it will.
Any further questions of staff? One more, Becky?
Sorry.
Okay.
On condition, I think it's 16, it's, you're asking for them to pay in lieu of not having parkland within the facility. And it says the city may require it, it doesn't say the city has to. Since this is a Habitat building, I would like to propose that we ask the city to waive that 1 fee of the payment in lieu of parkland.
So, is that a question?
I guess it's a question, can we do that?
You know, I don't know. What I would just say is, so it says, the context of that section is, it's on page 32 of your packet. It says, the applicant shall dedicate to the city a tract of land within or adjacent to the proposed division not less than 6.25% of the gross area of said subdivision. So the idea is that you're either going to dedicate 6.25% of your land, or this planning commission may permit the applicant to pay a sum of money in lieu of that. Because they're not dedicating the 6.25%, that's what takes it to the 13%. And I would argue that we should, based on that, continue to have that condition in place.
Guess I would argue that Habitat for Humanity doesn't have a big funding source. And since we're still requiring all the other SDCs, that's one way we could help cut some of the costs of building these homes.
Would you like us to respond?
You guys can present in a little bit, so you can raise that at that point.
Well, then we'll move on to applicant in favor, speak in favor, spoken or written testimony will now be received from those in favor of the application. Please state your name and address for the record, provide copies of written testimony, and respond to direct questions from the hearing body. Who wants to go first?
There we go.
Yeah.
You're on that. I don't think we got.
Yeah, I think staff did a really great job at covering, I'm Grace Wolf from APS Engineering. I'm a land use planner. I think staff did a great job of summarizing the application, and I know we've seen it multiple times now, so we're open for any questions, but just in follow-up, a suggestion regarding your comment on the fee in lieu waiving. We are doing a public access easement, which would probably be very close to that amount, so that would be one thought that we have regarding that.
I think that actually makes sense. I think it would be, I'm just gonna throw this out there, and I mean, if we could get it into the park, as Becky was saying, if we could essentially get it a little further in, that would be really awesome. But that's offsite, I get that that's offsite, but I mean, if we're horse trading here, I don't know. But I mean, I get what you're saying. The one argument that I would have, against that is we would have required a sidewalk essentially across the frontage of all the properties. And so the public access easement doesn't quite, I mean, it's adding 2 feet, we would require, either 5 or 6, I don't know. So I don't know.
I think that's probably the best, we could do. I think improving that. Is this okay if I just speak from the audience like this? I think, to Grace's point, Zach Fells with AKS. To Grace's point, I think, and I guess just in consideration of your kind of gracious offer that we could waive those parks fees, that connection does provide some sort of public benefit. It does provide a connection to a public park. I think there's a logical connection there. I appreciate Fred's position that, that is largely something that the city's going to ask for anyway, so it's probably not getting us much further than what was already offered, but I guess maybe a creative way for you to consider kind of meeting those 2 requirements, meeting that 6.25% park dedication and acknowledging Habitat's kind of constrained resource. So we really appreciate that feedback. Thank you.
Any other?
No other comments unless you guys have more questions.
Do you have a target community that you're trying to serve with these homes? I know historically you've done veterans, for example, or besides the traditional historical families that Habitat has served. Is there a designated population for this housing yet? Has that been part of the conversations?
Hi, Jerry M. Reese, Habitat for Humanity Executive Director. So we do have all those programs that we give preference to veterans and whatnot, but we do target the hard to house. If you look at AMIs, so most definitely we do still have a veteran program, and we do give preference to those families when they do apply.
So, can I follow up?
Go ahead.
Would it be safe to say that most likely these folks who would be filling these homes would probably be families?
Most definitely. Again, that's what we also give preference to is families with children, with young children and whatnot. So yes, most of our families are with children. Any other questions?
Any questions? All right, thank you. Well, we'll move on to neutral testimony. Spoken or written testimony will not be received from those neutral to the application. State your name and address for the record, provide copies of written testimony, and respond to direct questions from the hearing's body. Nobody doing that. Those opposed may speak. Spoken and written testimony will now be received from those opposed to the application. State your name and address for the record, provide copies of written testimony, respond to direct questions from the hearing's body. Nobody there.
Brett, I have one question. Did you receive any written testimony prior to the meeting?
I did not. I looked before I came back.
Are there any other further questions from the planning commission? If no objections, the hearing and record is closed. 7:28 p.m. So then we have the deliberation and decision. Pretty simple, straightforward, and easy, in my opinion. Any other questions? If not, there's a sample motion. Sharon, is that for us, please?
Right under where it says action.
I move to approve file number SUV 2024-01, adopting findings and conditions and the staff recommendations as provided in the staff report.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes.
One sec, Cohen was the second? Yes. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, folks. Unless you want to hang tight, see how the city of Independence works, exactly what it does for work.
Appreciate it, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Looking forward to it. All right, we'll move on to 7.2 of new business review of draft housing adjustment code. Do we have another staff report, please, Fred?
You betcha. Oh, that was good and quick. Shoot, I was looking into that more for you folks, but that was good and quick. All right. Housing adjustments. So you remember that, the state of Oregon, recently passed Senate Bill 1537, and as part of that, they have the ability to adjust a whole bunch of things. Our applicants can request the ability to adjust a whole bunch of things. And so I included that language for you in page 67 and 68 of your packet. You'll note all of those things. I have read them previously in one of these meetings. You can adjust things like the height of a building, you can adjust things like the setbacks of a building, you can adjust things like the parking minimums for a building, minimum lot sizes, building lot coverage, design standards, all of those sorts of things. And so realizing that, I have talked with our city attorney and about the best way to essentially go forward. It seems to me that we have two options. One is we can try and ratchet down our code where basically every really make it prescriptive, where there's a whole bunch of things where to get to 10 you really, it takes you a little bit, or you're not going to be able to adjust a whole bunch of things. Or just make it hard, put a burden of proof on the applicant to actually prove that these are gonna have a benefit for housing. And we have elected to go with the second one because it respects the integrity of our code as it is right now in a much better way. We have strived for a very long time to create a relatively simple code with design standards that regulate key things in the community that we value. Things like garages set back from the front facade, things like the amount of windows on the front of a building, These are things that the community has proactively tried to get ahead of over time, and trying to go in and then make the code more complicated so people would have a tough time getting 10 of these things is not something that we wanted to do. So this is our proposed approach. It's essentially based right out of the law, where it says the specific criteria to allow an adjustment, that's in 68010, and you'll see that those are basically out of the state law there. But the meat of the process then comes in on the 68020, where detailed information is required. And so if you're requesting an adjustment, you have to show how it actually benefits housing. That's the idea. And so hopefully, we'll get, no doubt, we will get somebody coming in and saying, hey, I wanna put another floor in my building. And they will be able to show that. I mean, it's just gonna be easy to show that it has a benefit for housing because you're gonna get more units because of the other floor, you know? If there's less parking requirements, you're probably gonna get a bigger building on your lot, you're gonna get more units in it. You can easily show things like that, but some of the things like the design stuff of buildings is gonna be much harder to show that that has a clear benefit to the cost of housing or the number of units. And so that's what this code is really trying to do. It's really try and say, yeah, there's some things that you're gonna be able to adjust, but you can't adjust everything, right? My fear ultimately is that somebody is going to, that someone could potentially come in and request 10 design adjustments and essentially build a box that's tall with few windows and limited design value. What this is intended to do is specifically make it harder to do that because there's clear things that do not have a benefit for housing. Like one standard that I use all the time is the proportion of windows on the front of the building. We require 25% windows on the front of a building, of the front of a residential structure. The reason we do that is because we want an inviting streetscape in our residential areas, and we also want eyes on the street from the residences, from the residences, right? You know, it creates a more neighborly atmosphere, all of this sort of stuff. If somebody were to come in and say, I don't want to do 25% windows on the front of a building, I want to do 4%, right? And ask for a design adjustment, I don't think that has a whole lot of merit, and I don't think that they're gonna be able to prove that it actually has a benefit for the housing, because those couple of additional windows, which have a long benefit for the people that will live in the house, are not gonna have sort of the cost return that other things would. So, am I making any sense at all? Okay, so that's what this code is essentially intended to do. It's not gonna be able to address the things that are clearly gonna have a housing impact, but hopefully it is able to address some of those things that won't have a benefit on housing. So you'll see just some of the detailed information that we put in there. So detailed design plans, you know, like that compares the project with and the project without the design adjustment. Right, so we can look at it and say, oh yeah, there are more units in there, or whatever it might be. Or if they're requesting, say, less windows, 2 cost estimates that show the difference and show that it will have a market effect on the people who are going to be buying or renting the units. So that's essentially what this is doing. Now you'll note too that part of the thing that makes these housing adjustments really strange is, and this should probably be 68030 at the bottom now that I'm looking at it, on page 74, that second 68020. You'll see that one of the things that we want to do with this too is to specify when the request for adjustment to housing standards can occur in the process. So what I don't want to have happen is have somebody come in with a historic preservation approval. They're requesting something that's much taller or whatever than the underlying zone allows, and go to historic preservation, let's say, and say, here you go, here's the application, and I don't want historic preservation to then say, we don't allow that height or whatever. They have to go through the housing adjustment process first, and then you have the things that could get adjusted out, and then it goes to historic preservation, and historic preservation would just review the adjusted application, if that makes sense. That's what we're trying to do with this. It's the same thing with you folks. If you have a site say an apartment complex or something comes in, and you're reviewing a site design review for it, I want those things adjusted first before it gets to you folks. Or consolidated as part of one review. That's what that whole housing adjustment process is intended to do, because essentially it through a completely different process and the land use process that we typically go through. And the question then is, where does this go in the grand scheme of things? So that's what that second section is intended to do. Are there any questions about that? Yeah, Courtney.
Do you think you had a bad dream? Or would a bad dream with this one?
No, I mean, it's one of those things.
Did you see this coming down the pipe? I mean, I'm trying to figure out what kind of land use planner person does this kind of stuff.
Right, well, I mean, that's the thing of it is, you know, like, a couple of years ago, DLCD did a book group, right? And they were going through a book, A Portable City or something like that. They had the author, on for a little book group discussion. Well, the author at the time said, I don't care about design standards, establish design standards, just tweak your densities and stuff like that, allow more density, right? But be clear about the design that you want. And I feel like this goes completely against that, you know, where this is like, yeah, your densities are wrong, but so are your design standards. Like, just essentially open up everything for people to do whatever they want. And I just feel like that's not gonna create the type of community that we've strived to achieve for years, right? And so, a bad dream, probably not, but like, I see people coming in and being like, oh, I don't wanna do 25% windows on the front of the building. Or we have design standards for a downtown, we require 60% windows on the bottom floor of commercial buildings. We require 15-foot first floor heights in downtown commercial buildings, because we have first floor heights that are very tall in our historic buildings, right? We require brick on the front of our facades. And so somebody comes in, says, those windows, that first floor height, and that brick is driving up the cost of my project. I want to adjust those things. All of a sudden, we get a box with shiplap, with hardy plank siding in downtown, right, with few windows, right? It's like, no, we don't want that.
It kind of seems that it just undermined all the work you've done to make
Well,
development code working well.
and I would say this is intended for folks in much more complicated codes. We have a very simple code. We've strived to make it simple, and adjusting 10 things could adjust basically everything.
So if a developer came to you and wanted to do all these changes, within what you have for the proposal here, how do you negotiate with that person to back that person down or?
Well, so that's what these are, that's what
This gives them a roadmap to live on.
yeah, this is 68020, you essentially have to prove that what you're asking for has a benefit to housing. And as I've talked with our attorney, it's for each individual thing. You have to prove each adjustment has that benefit. So you can't just group them all together and say, look at how beneficial this is.
So I have a question about that, because you have language in here about applicant may choose to consolidate one or more housing adjustment applications. So we want to make sure that those are kept separate, and you need to make your analysis and meet the criteria for each individual one. I'm not sure that language is.
Yeah, okay. I think that's good. I had a subsequent conversation with her about that, but I will put more language in to specifically, do that. Cause I asked that question, but I think enhancing the language to make it clear makes good sense.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Go ahead, Devin.
I think that's a great idea because if you have to do separate applications, the only people who are gonna be willing to do that are people who truly believe that this will be something that they can actually prove. They're not gonna go through the paperwork and the expense, but if you allow them to consolidate, it makes it cheaper for them to be able to, and it costs staff time, which is what I think we should be concerned about, is we have one planner for the city, and if he's busy doing 30 reviews of things that are kind of erroneous, then that's not a good use of his time, as well. So if we wanna make it accessible to people, but we don't wanna give them a free pass to just try to get away with things. So I just wanna make sure to say that on record.
Yeah, no, that's good.
So is there like administrative work that we have to do?
Yeah, so this
That'll
will.
be coming to us?
This will be coming to you in July. We here are like, I mean, I think I don't know if other communities are addressing this. I know that, the LCD has already given us a call to ask us about this, and so I'm gonna be talking with them this week. I know that our city attorney hadn't seen it much before this, but it feels like something we absolutely should get on top of, because it could significantly impact us.
You shared your information with Monmouth and Dallas, or did they share?
I haven't talked with them about it.
They could be just unaware of everything.
Yeah, I mean, this bill right here is some sort of housing production bill, right? And the key takeaway with this bill was that, oh, you can expand your urban growth boundary. And it was like, oh, okay, and so I read that, and I'm like, well, that's really difficult. It's really difficult to expand your urban growth boundary. But then I'm paging through it, and I find housing land use adjustments, what's that? I started reading that.
That's your bad dream.
I'm like, oh my goodness, like this is crazy.
Sure, if I can say one more.
Go ahead, Evan.
Yeah, no, I think it's a perfect example of how one community doesn't fit all communities in Oregon, and that's why the legislature has to be really careful in what they pass in laws, because it disproportionately impacts small communities. But my question is around conversations with developers, and how are we going to engage developers in our community about this process and make sure that they feel heard in this process, because we want to make sure that they're part of the solution. Even though sometimes that can get adversarial, but we want them to be participating in part of that solution.
Right. I mean, I have talked with some developers about, we do know there's been projects that have, for instance, gotten held up because of the 40-foot height requirement that we just recently put on downtown. I know that there's also projects that are limiting the amount of units that they're putting on a lot because of parking requirements. We know that, and so when I've mentioned, hey, there is this bill that is going to give some ability to adjust some of those requirements, people are very interested in that possibility. Another thing is too, we just recently did that 4,500 square foot lot variance where we're expanding that. That got up to council and they asked the Historic Preservation Commission to consider it, so I went back to Historic Preservation Commission. Well, now that this is out, you don't even need that process. You could go through the housing adjustment process and ask for the reduced lot size. It's not a variance that would come to you, it's a staff level review now, and so now I'm curious, what what do I do with that code? Perhaps this covers it. You know, so that's an instance where, it is gonna provide people flexibility. If this would have been in effect when that guy with that project originally came in, I could have said, oh, you can apply for a land use adjustment, you can, and get down to your second lot that we're hoping to do. So.
I just have one question. Portion where you're talking about how you're gonna notify people if there's a request, the change requested. And it says everyone within 100 feet. I thought you had enlarged that to 250 feet.
It's 250 feet in our code for everything. It's this standard, this state law says 100 feet. So that's what I was matching the 100 feet to.
But since we don't really have a paper that helps when people get, I like the longer area. I like the 250, so people get a notice of things, because it's very difficult lots of times to find out what's going on.
Right, this is a tough thing because it says, like in 3C there, and this is straight out of the state law too, only the applicant can appeal the decision. So, you know, so you send it out to folks, say they comment, I don't want a 48-foot tall building right next to me. Well, they can't appeal it, you know, only the applicant can appeal it.
But they could have their say at least.
Well, kind of. They can say something and then be frustrated when
It's built.
it's built.
Well, maybe they change, they make enough impression and we don't say yes.
It's a staff level decision.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess
Go ahead.
the question around that is, building off that is how do we effectively communicate with our fellow citizens about these issues without, obviously, while respecting the state law, it says the minimum, we can go above if we so choose to do that. And what's the plan to effectively communicate what the state law allows us to and not to do? Because I think that's the challenge, right? The legislature has made it clear that housing production is a priority of the state, and we're gonna make it as easy as possible for developers to build, as long as it can be defensible within our laws. So how do we communicate to our fellow citizens that, this is part of the legislature's priority, and this is part of the state law, and there's only so much the city can do, so that you and staff here aren't the ones getting the finger pointed at.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question. We are gonna talk with the council about it, in the near future, and I'm sure that, they're gonna have to adopt this too. So I do think, yeah, it probably makes sense to put out something in our newsletter, about it. Just sort of front end that. And I don't mind, putting out a notice board for when we're dealing with these things. But, it's one of those things where, providing opportunity to comment and then not being able to do anything really with regard to the comment is a frustrating situation.
Sally?
One small thing, Fred, is you might have somebody who's really familiar with the citations to proofread this. You're changing about chapter, subchapter, section, subsection. Make
Okay.
sure those are all correct.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Okay.
So the July meeting then will be be a public hearing.
There'll be a public hearing on this, and then there'll also the mural, code will be coming back before you as well. So, and our attorney has, taken a look at that, made some changes. I got that back. I think it's essentially ready, to go. So you'll see that again next time. That will be a public hearing too.
And is the July meeting before the 4th, or is it gonna be after?
We're going to have the July meeting on the 8th. So we'll have that, and then we'll also have, we're anticipating the central townage plan for you folks to start looking at. Looking at the rest of the year, it's gonna be really busy. So, central townage plan in July, hearing in August. In August too, you'll probably be looking at the downtown parking experience project. That will be a first look at that. Likely, July 9th, I have scheduled for a work session for the downtown parking experience. I really apologize about that last work session, everybody. That was way too late. They told me that that was gonna be a short meeting. I apologize for that. I was not good.
It wasn't as late as some of the meetings we've had.
Yeah,
So it wasn't.
yeah, no, it was long. So public hearing on the downtown parking experience will probably be in September. Housing production strategy will come to you in October, and then a public hearing on the housing production strategy in November. So like when just looking at that, that's like a dang lot of work to,
Short amount of time.
in a short amount of time.
It's done, so done by the end of the year.
The housing production strategy, yeah.
Well, I know I won't be here in August. So hopefully Alex
Sounds good.
or Sally. Sally does a good job.
Yeah, as coming out of that central townage plan, we will have, associated map and regulation changes too at a certain point, and so those will come back before you at a certain point. But we're gonna adopt the plan first, and then, come back with the map and regulation changes at a later date. So, a lot of work that's going through the system. All of these grants are sort of coming due at the same time, so.
All right, any other discussion or information items?
You have a video.
Sure, we have a video.
Short little video. Karen, I sent Karen 3 videos, and she chose the shortest one.
But I didn't choose it, I just recommended strongly to Brett that he do this.
So you watched all 3?
Well, I watched, yes, but not, maybe about a half to 2/3 of each one.
So who are those movie guys? Something in Ebert, Cisco and Ebert, you're kind of our Cisco and Ebert. We must get a thumbs up then.
Because I want to put these up on YouTube. Screen 2.
Oh, yeah, it's on the side.
We pulled it off,
Okay.
close it up.
Perfect. That's not the right one.
Well, this is the one that I got the.
Oh, maybe that's it. No,
Okay.
I
Okay.
don't think so.
So I'm gonna have to go to, because I copied the link that you sent me, so, but maybe I need to send it to you.
Very interesting to see why.
Right. I'll never know. We're worried.
No. Perfect. It was a Dutch guy.
Going back to Amsterdam this fall too. Go back there.
Really nice, huh?
Yeah,
Tuesday, so I want.
We want
Yeah.
the reason that I liked it is because I'm talking about the central sandwich plan and possibly making E Street some sort of corridor. I just immediately thought of something like that. That would be,
right.
yeah, smaller scale, obviously, but I was hoping that you guys would see that too.
It's gonna be attractive.
Has anybody ever been to Carmel, Indiana?
I have a question though, about the rise of e-bikes.
Yeah.
And so how are those being classified in terms of being allowed into such pathways and trails?
Yeah, it's really tough. I think we allow them on, our path, I'm sorry, we allow them on our pathways right now. And I mean, hopefully, we're creating enough space for them where they can maneuver safely on the trail. We haven't heard of any sort of incidents with e-bikes and people, but I mean, the thing with e-bikes is the speed differential is really, really different. And so they just go a whole lot faster than people are expecting on a bike. But the way I figure it is if you give enough space for folks on the path, they're gonna be able to navigate, unless we just have a ton of people on the path.
Well, then e-bike operators can be respectful too, I mean, just regular bike riders. People watch.
Yeah, I don't know. We don't have any sort of plans to do anything about them. I know that some people are trying to figure out where to accommodate like all these different modes on the street. I mean, I just think if we can create pleasant spaces that are wide enough for folks, then there's probably not gonna be an issue that we can accommodate things like scooters, bicyclists, and all that sort of stuff. Also, some of our side streets, I've told you guys about one of the videos that you'll see in the future is what Barcelona's doing with their super blocks. They're routing traffic around the outside of these things and then pedestrianizing some of the interior streets of these larger sort of blocks. Vancouver, BC has actually done the same thing with a huge section of just west of their downtown. It's really cool. You can't drive straight through it, right? You have to drive around it. Like if you drive straight through it, you like get funneled back out to go on the vehicular stuff. Well, what that creates inside of it is completely sort of pedestrian-friendly streets, quiet, residential streets, but a lot of foot traffic, a lot of bike traffic through those spots. And we could do something similar here. In fact, our transportation system plan actually calls for an idea like that, where it's like we have 7, we have 4. What if we took something like 5th and started making it a more pedestrianized sort of route through the neighborhood? And if we did something like that, you could safely operate an e-bike or a bike or a scooter or whatever it might be on a road like that. So I don't know. I don't know if I answered the question, but I think that's sort of how I'm thinking about it. I also say that too because we got old people riding around on scooters, right? My wife's grandpa used to ride around on one of those scooters, and he would do it on rural 55 mile an hour, the shoulder of rural 55 mile an hour highways. I'm like, that guy did he ride his scooter like 6 miles, And to Gig Harbor was just like, what are you doing? But he did it, and so we know people want mobility, people want the opportunity to get around, and people are not always going to be able to drive a vehicle or an automobile, their personal automobile. And so let's give them places where they can safely navigate through the community.
All right, any other questions? I'll entertain a motion for adjourn.
Seconded.
All right, all those in favor?